Hey, let me go first, Baba, actually, because I don't know if you know this, but we did have the same advisor. Ryan is actually telling the truth. And I was a few years behind Baba at Duke University, and I always heard this name, Baba Shiv, Baba Shiv. You always hear about the legendary students that preceded you. He also has this memorable name. And so as a result, you end up reading their papers and sort of tracking what they're doing. And Baba, one of the papers that I really enjoy the most reading that has come out of your lab is this paper on placebo effects. And so I've my dad's a doctor, so I've heard about placebo effects in medicine, but yours was like a different kind of take on placebo effects on prices. And so I thought maybe for our audience, if you could talk a little about that, show them just kind of some of the interesting twists that they can do using placebo effects in business.
Oh, happy to do that. So, yeah, this goes back several years, and I remember I was talking to an audience. These were senior executives from Dell, at least some of the members of the audience. And one of the questions, I was curious about is that we have all this research in marketing that says that if you lower price, and if you think about Dell, its predominant promotion was, low value, price. And I said, there's research saying that if you constantly focus on price, lower price, it's going to affect perceptions of quality.
Sure.
And these people came back to me and pushed back and said, wait a second, it is only perceptions. It's not reality. Someone is going to buy the Dell computer and they're going to find that it is great and the word of mouth will take care of itself. And in a way that kind of kindled my curiosity, because what they were doing is saying that the decisions that we make are independent of the experience that we go through. Right?
What does that mean? What do you mean the
decisions? Which means that
if
you think about it, if I'm making a decision, so I'll just draw this out here. Oh, if I can see, get the thing out here. It's not drawing out here. But the basic idea is the following, right? If I'm going to buy a Dell computer, I know that it is a value. I know it's on price and so on. So that is the decision phase. In the decision phase, I'm focusing more on value, more on price. So I'll rather go for a Dell than an HP. Or at that point in time, it was Compaq, which is a big kind of retailer.
Okay.
Now comes the actual experience. I'm actually using the computer. So is it the question, what they were pushing back on me is saying that, yes, when I'm making the decision, there are perceptions of quality that are going into the decision, saying that if it is lower price, it must be lower quality. But that will not turn into reality in the sense that I'm going to use the product. I'm going to find out the product is good like any other product out there.
Sure.
And therefore, the real experience would kind of trump perceptions. That was a basic kind of thing about it.
Okay.
And I said, is it possible that...
And they pushed hard on this.
They pushed really hard on this. And I wanted to kind of prove a point saying that, can perceptions turn into reality? And again, you talked about your dad being in the medical profession. And in the medical profession, we have a lot of research on the placebo effect, in the sense that what people expect will turn into reality. There have been studies that have shown that you have a doctor wearing a nice white coat, attending to you and examining you. That is going to be more effective in terms of actual outcomes than if the person is not wearing that white coat.
Okay.
So I said, okay, fine, let us try to examine this. We examined this in different contexts. One of them was in energy drink. So imagine, Jonathan, that I'm giving you an energy drink. You've not heard of this energy drink before. And I tell you...
Where are you giving me this drink?
I'm just going to tell you that as part of the study,
Okay.
we're going to give you this drink because this drink has the right ingredients to kind of increase your mental acuity. In other words, your mind is going to be more alert because moment from now, you're going to be solving a series of word jumble puzzles.
So I'll do better on a test or something
You'll
if I drink
doing
this.
better on a test.
Okay,
Word jumble tests and so on.
okay.
And imagine that I'm giving you this drink and I tell you that the regular price of this drink is $3, but I'm giving you a discount. I'm going to give you this energy drink at a price of $2. You know what the real actual price is, but I'm giving you at this discount.
Okay.
And now I ask you to solve a series of puzzles. Now let us say there's Jonathan Barr out there, a second Jonathan out there, which is an A/B test. That person has not been told that the person is receiving the drink at a discount.
Okay.
It is at $3.
Aha.
So there's one person who is consuming the drink. Both of you are consuming the drink, except that for you, you received that drink at a discount. You actually paid for the drink.
Okay.
The other person has paid $3. You paid only $2.
Okay, so I pay $2, but I think it's supposed to cost $3.
You think the price is $3? That's a market price.
But I got a deal.
You got a deal.
Okay, but somebody else like me is just told, hey, you got to pay $3 for this drink.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now you go to solve the puzzles. So the question that we ask is that, will the number of puzzles that you end up solving
Okay.
be any different than the number of puzzles that the other person who bought the drink at the regular price end up solving?
What do you mean by puzzles? What are these puzzles like? I mean, I can think of puzzles that my children use.
So this will be typical word jumble puzzle, like I can't remember these things now. So it'll be like jumble the word, and you have to unjumble the word to create an English word out of that.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So Burcam. So first thing that'll come to mind is camber.
Okay.
But it's not camber, it is embark.
Oh,
Right? I mean, that's how you have to unjumble the puzzle.
Okay.
And it turned out in that initial piece of research, what we found systematically was that if you had consumed the energy drink, but you got it at a discount, you got a deal on that energy drink,
Yeah.
you'll end up solving fewer puzzles.
why would I end up solving fewer puzzles?
And that takes us to the next step.
Okay.
It's about what is price doing? It is setting up expectations. It's a
Okay.
signal of expectations
Okay.
about what the actual experience is going to be. In this case, how effective am I going to be at solving these puzzles? Because that's why you consume the energy drink.
Okay.
So we got into this thing about, okay, fine, it is influencing reality, but we wanted to say because my work is in neuroeconomics, so which means that if I can kind of probe into the workings of the human brain, I might be able to come up with the more definitive answer to the question that you asked, is that how does the expectation turn into reality? So price is
Yeah.
a signal of expectations, and these expectations turn to reality. And one of the things that very quickly I got into was wine. So if you think about wine, all of you have had wine before, and people will swear, if you're a wine connoisseur, people would swear that a wine that is of higher price, market price, actually tastes better. The experience is more pleasurable compared to consuming a lower price wine.
Okay.
In general.
In general, yeah, yeah, for sure.
You're different, I know that.
Yeah, yeah, of course, of course.
So
As a 9-wine drinker, I'm particularly savvy about this.
Exactly. So one of the things that we did here, this is a functional MRI study. And the functional MRI study is that imagine that you are all part of this study, and what you observe here is 5 different wines.
Okay. Wait a second. A functional MRI is what? I've had an MRI for my shoulder
I'll tell you in a
before.
second.
Okay,
I'll tell you in a
great.
second. So we're getting into 5 different wines, and the wines range in market price from $5 to $90.
Okay.
That's the only piece of information that you're being told.
Great. So I should expect a $90 wine is better than the $5 wine.
Correct. That's what you would think in terms of perceptions. But the question that we asked in this research is that, will an area of the brain that codes for pleasure in real time, it's called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, somewhere here, that's the area that codes for pleasure in real time.
So when I'm experiencing
When you
pleasure,
experience the pleasure.
that's the area of the brain that's active.
Correct.
Got it.
Is that area of the brain going to be more active when you're consuming the $90 wine compared to the $5 wine?
Well, if I expect it to be better, then probably better. Is
But
that right?
here's a trick. We don't tell you about this. You're consuming the same wine. All the wines out there are identical to one another. They're all California Cabernet Sauvignons.
Okay.
Now the question we ask is the same wine,
Yeah.
but will that area of the brain that codes for pleasure in real time be more active when the brain thinks it is tasting a higher price wine?
Okay, so if I think about what the Dell managers told you, what Dell executive told you, is that no, if the wine was $90, I taste the wine, it's the taste of the wine that should overcome whatever perception I have of the price.
Exactly.
Okay.
It is the bottom of pleasure. The bottom of pleasure is just the wine, the actual wine.
Sure.
Other factors should not kind of have an influence.
The
on pleasure.
objective experience of consuming the wine should dictate how much of this is active.
Absolutely.
Got it.
It can even be the subjective experience, by the way, because if I didn't have access to a functional MRI, which I'll talk about momentarily,
Sure.
you will say that, you know what, this wine tasted better. Now, it could be simply because that you actually got more pleasure out of the wine, or you think that you should be getting more pleasure out of the wine because it is higher priced.
Okay, I'm with you.
So that's why we're trying to kind of test this. So what we do in functional MRI is that you can, it's an MRI gets into the internal, the tissues of the body. Functional MRI is able to record the workings of the brain in real time.
Okay.
So we know which area of the brain is being active when you're tasting the wine. So imagine that you're in the scanner. We kind of have the first price that is showing up, which means the $90
Wait, so
wine.
I'm basically in the scanner
You're
like
basically
this,
in the
lying
scanner.
down, and there's a screen above me.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So you're motionless out there. There's a straw that goes into, 2 straws that go into your mouth.
So I have a wine straw basically
wine
that
straw.
kind of goes down my body.
No, it just goes here.
Okay.
One is going to squirt the wine.
Yeah.
But before we squirt the
It's
wine...
like a wine catheter, basically.
What?
Yeah.
Come on. Okay,
Okay.
now that's going to be crazy.
Okay.
Okay. Let's take catheter out of the picture.
Got it. But this thing is in my mouth. All right.
That's right. And so the other straw, just for the sake of thing, is in between trials, we have to rinse the mouth out. So we just squirt water. The person can then swirl the water and swallow it. But we are monitoring the whole brain activity in real time as you're tasting the different wines.
Okay, so I'm in this thing, and you tell me $10, and you squirt the wine.
Squirt the wine.
And you look to see, you scan my brain to see
Whole brain
how much of this is active.
That's right. No, we're taking the whole brain scan in real time. What are the different areas of the brain that are being active and so on.
Okay.
Then it goes off. Then the water is squirted. Then the next price shows up, maybe a $90 because I'm having it random.
Sure.
The next wine goes is the $90 wine,
Sure.
quote unquote.
Quote unquote, same wine every time.
Same one. You don't know that.
Of course not.
And so we have different trials out there, and what you do in functional MRI is simply a test of contrast. But what you're doing is that you have activation from the higher priced wines, you have activation for the lower priced wines, and you just do a subtraction methodology, and you see what remains out there.
Okay.
Now, if it is truly objective, our pleasure is truly objective, there should not be any differences across the trials.
Because it's the same wine, or like the Dell guy said, they'll see use the computer and see the computer how good it is, regardless of the price.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what we find in that piece of research, I think it's quite conclusive in the sense that what we actually find is that the area of the brain that codes for pleasure in real time, which is the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, actually is more active when the brain thinks it is tasting a higher price wine than the lower price wine.
Wait a second. So you're physically experiencing this as something different. It's not simply that you're reporting
That's right.
that this wine is better because
That's right.
it costs more money.
That's right.
Right? Which is, kind of what everybody says, but you're actually physically experiencing it different.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we found. And so, I mean, one question that we'll ask is, as academics, we're also interested in the theory behind this. Right? And what is the theory behind it that will kind of drive this kind of phenomenon? And that's where, as Ryan mentioned in the intro, I mean, my research has gotten into two brain areas, which is the liking system and the wanting system. So wanting system is more the motivational system. It is the anticipated pleasure system in the brain.
Okay.
So you're lying in the scanner.
Okay, so but before you go into scanner, so give me an example. I'm going to buy something. What do you mean in the context of that, of liking and wanting? I'm going to go buy a shirt. I'm going to go buy this T-shirt.
You're buying the T-shirt.
Okay.
There is an anticipation of pleasure that you're going to receive from wearing the T-shirt.
Okay, I'm going to love wearing this T-shirt. That's anticipated.
You are anticipating that you're going to like it.
Yeah.
Then comes the actual pleasure of actually wearing the T-shirt.
Sure.
That is the liking system of the brain.
I see.
That is coding for pleasure in real time. The other one is more anticipation.
Okay, so when you are doing these experiments with the energy drink, for example, if I remember correctly, I remember it was in a gym you did it?
No, this was done in a lab. We had the one that was done with Dan Ariely, and you and I have worked with Dan before, was more on painkillers. So that was more of a field study in terms of they consume the painkiller beforehand, and then we do, they're given either name brand painkiller or a, what do you call that?
Generic.
Generic.
Yeah.
And what we find out there is exactly, when if you consume the generic, the outcome is not as good as if you're consuming a name brand. I mean, that was a field study that we did.
Yeah.
These were all lab studies.
Unless you have a PhD in marketing and then you know that that's not true and then it works.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so just so I understand in terms of this energy drink, when I know that this thing is cost $3, which is presumably a lot, full price, then I anticipate it being better. That's the wanting system sort of experiencing value in using this
Anticipating value, right?
Okay.
So let's go back to the wine study. $90 first shows up. Now keep in mind there are always caveats, because if you know the brand name, then things will be different, but we control for all that. There's no brand name.
Yeah.
$90 has come up. The wanting system says that's going to be high anticipated reward.
Sure.
Okay, because the $90
Good wine, expensive.
Good, expensive wine.
Got it.
Now, what the wanting system does is informs the liking system. These two systems talk to one another. And what the wanting system will do is activate the liking system. It'll say that, hey, something pleasurable is going to be delivered.
Oh, so the liking system is almost like a follower of this wanting system.
Correct.
And how it responds is a little bit dictated by what the wanting system sort of tells it.
It could be the wanting system. It could also be liking. So, for example, I'm sure many of the people in this webinar would have experienced this. You go to Napa, you go to Sonoma, and you buy a bottle of wine, and it just is very pleasurable.
Yeah.
You bring that wine home.
Yeah.
For some reason, it doesn't taste as good.
Correct.
That's because what is happening here is that the ambience in that, the sun and so on, is activating the liking system. Nothing to do with the wine. It has already activated the liking system.
Oh, I see.
Now you taste the wine. What is happening is that there is bottom-up pleasure, which is objective, which is coming from the ingredients in the wine,
Sure.
taste buds, the nasal inputs, etc.
So there is some amount of liking you have for this wine because the wine is good.
Inherently.
Okay, inherently. Okay.
Now it is coming in, but your liking system has now already been sensitized, either by the ambience
Okay.
in Sonoma Valley or by the wanting system. The wanting system already informed the liking system something pleasurable is going to be delivered.
Okay, so can I take you back though to the original story, because I did not, I knew of this paper, but I didn't know the story of how it started, the Dell thing. So let's go back to the Dell story and let's put it in the context of those executives and like what they were wrong about and what they should have done differently.
So a couple of things that the model of the story out here, and by the way, why am I doing all this talking myself? I'm going
Don't
to talk
worry.
about your research.
Soon you'll get a chance.
Okay. So the most important lesson from here is that keep in mind that perceptions are not perceptions very often. They will turn into reality.
Okay, so they don't remain just as perceptions.
They don't remain as perceptions.
Okay,
And perceptions can turn into reality.
okay,
But this will only happen for what are called experience attributes. So if you
Okay.
think about economics, we did this in our grad school. There are search attributes, there are experience attributes. Right?
Sure.
Search attribute is that I can look at this iPad, I know it is a black kind of a cover on the thing. It's a search attribute, I know
sure.
it's black.
Yeah,
But the experience is going to come from my actually writing on the iPad, the screen, and so on. That's the actual experience.
got it. So how it feels, how it feels. Like if I click here,
Correct.
yeah,
So the thing about that, with search attributes, if you're going to tell me this is higher price versus lower price, I can just tell it is black. I don't have to there's no ambiguity involved in that experience. But if it's an experience attribute, and wine, if you think about it, is all experience, it's experiential.
yeah,
That is where you're going to have perceptions turning into reality.
I see. So in situations, so if I have something that has objective qualities to it, the perceptions are going to be less important. The placebo effect is going to be less important. When I have things that are basically experiential, that are about feelings,
Correct.
right? That's where the placebo effect is gonna be strong.
That's right. Now, I heard that you went to Vegas recently.
I,
Let me change the topic here.
I may or may not have gone to Las Vegas recently.
No,
yes.
he did say he went to Vegas today, and I don't know what you do in Vegas because you don't gamble, you don't drink at all. And so, I mean, you drink sometime, but
I have other vices.
so I was giving this talk at a luxury conference. Don't ask me why they asked me to come over there to Vegas, a luxury conference, and I told them about $90 wine, right? Very expensive. And one guy raises his hand and he says, "Wait a second. $90 is actually a cheap wine." I said, oh, okay. But again, it depends on the context, right? I mean, who is actually in the test? For some people, $90 is a cheap wine.
Yeah.
For some other people, $300 is an expensive wine. So we have to calibrate the prices in this study for these individuals. The second important thing is the following.
Yeah.
The brain is not stupid.
Yeah.
Let us say that you saw on the screen $90. The wine that was delivered sucked.
Yeah.
The brain is not stupid. The brain is going to learn very quickly that, wait a second, that $90 wine that is going to be delivered the next time is going to suck.
Interesting. So it actually relates to a question we just got, which is the following from somebody in the audience, asked by I don't know, it's somebody call him Virendra. I don't know that I can pronounce the full name. And the person writes, even if perception turns into reality in the case of Dell, it would be only if you buy the Dell. In case the perception is very bad, one may not even buy the Dell. Is that a lost opportunity?
Absolutely. So if you think about it the following way, right, you got to understand that and you and I have done this research from before, we're trained by the same mentor.
Sure.
A lot of our work has been on how people make decisions.
Correct.
So there's a lot of research. If you look at the decision-making literature, tons of research on decisions. There's very little research on the actual experience itself, if you actually think about it.
Relatively speaking, that's correct.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah.
Right? And the basic thrust in here is to say that, yes, when you're making a decision, it might be a lost opportunity because perceptions will drive people's decisions. But we also know that when people are making choices, price tends to trump other attributes in general because
it's the easiest thing to see.
It's the easiest thing to see.
Yeah.
So what happens is that even though there are perceptions, you say, you know what, I'm still going to buy that because it's lower price. And then the kind of rational brain is saying, well, it is Dell, it must be good quality. But non-consciously, the brain has already registered that this might be not of that good quality. And so it is all, I mean, a lot of my research, and this is one of the things that I'll be sharing when in the program itself, is all these frameworks that are getting to the non-conscious side, the emotional side of the brain. Everything is happening non-consciously.
So basically, how can we use, for instance, price as a way to influence people's non-conscious perceptions of products,
Absolutely.
which in turn is going to influence the experience that they have with them. And obviously, if the experience is better,
That's right.
they'll talk more about it, and sort of then,
That's right.
then you have the virtuous circle of...
And in fact, let me kind of segue into another piece of research. I mean, I know that you're getting now into technology. I think it's just fascinating research, Jonathan. You're getting into how technology interfaces, etc., can influence decisions and behaviors and so on, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I would like you to share with the audience, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I'm springing this on you.
No problem.
In my mind, it is one of the classic studies. I mean, I've just been a big fan of that series of studies, which is about the judges in Israel making parole decisions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many of you in the audience have probably heard of this, but now hear it from the horse's mouth itself.
Yeah, I get to be the horse right now. Sure, I'm happy to talk about it because, you know, in many ways, the thinking that came from that research kind of started when I was in graduate school. So somehow, you know, like this sort of institution percolated these ideas into my mind. And, you know, you haven't been a Duke. I mean, you also probably remember that when we were in grad school together. Oh, when we were in grad school, not at the same time, but in the same grad school. So what happened there is that I don't know if you ever renovated. You think about for a moment if you ever renovated a house. Actually, when you moved to Stanford, you renovated your place,
Correct.
right? If you think about like renovating your bathroom, it's a series of decisions. And it's a series of decisions. Each one becomes increasingly more miserable, and it's a true test to your marriage that your marriage survived it because many marriages don't. And the reason is you start and you know you're sort of looking through a lot of options and you're figuring out like, you know, which of these do I like, which tile do I like. Now I don't know if you're like any normal person, you don't sit around there and have a sort of a preference ordering for tiles. And, you know, you do that, and then you may have to make the decision on the fixtures, and then finally decision on your throne, you know, the toilet, which one you're going to want. Each decision sort of becomes increasingly more difficult, not because the decision itself by itself is necessarily difficult, but it's the accumulation
Correct.
of making these decisions about things that I'm not sure about.
And you're second-guessing yourself.
You're second-guessing. You're like, you know, am I going to like this toilet? What is it going to look like? Is it going to retain resale value?
Correct.
Does it fit? I got these fixtures. Does it fit in my budget? And so on and so forth. And what happens for those of you who've experienced this and is that as you go through these decisions, and you know, you can't leave your bathroom unfinished.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It cannot have a toilet.
Yeah.
Right? It cannot have a faucet. It cannot have, you know, fixtures. You start getting into this pattern where you simplify your decisions. What does that mean? Like, man, I'm so sick and tired of looking at tiles. You just ask the salesperson, which one's on sale? Yeah, which one's on sale, or which is the most popular?
Yeah.
You know, or which one is made by some brand you've heard of, which is not necessarily the best brand, but it's just something you've heard of, right? So you actually, as you're getting tired, you simplify the decisions that you make. And so we had a bunch of evidence for processes like this in the context of car buying. And one of the criticisms that we got was that basically people said, yeah, sure, people who aren't experts go through this process because, you know, somebody who really knows bathroom tiles or who really knows fixtures, who really knows bathrooms, who can really do this, they'll know exactly what to pick.
That's right.
They don't get tired. And so to challenge that view, right, because experts, yeah, they're experts, but they're also people. And, you know, we know this from the research we've done, but also the research tradition we come from is that people have limited cognitive capacity. Experts might also get mentally fatigued. And as they get mentally fatigued, they still need to solve the problem. They still need to make a decision. How do you make that decision? You simplify. And so we were able to obtain a data set of parole decisions of a parole board in Israel. And so
this is about prisoners. Should they be let go or not?
Yeah. So basically, by law, basically Israeli law is based on British law, which is, you know, so is American law. But basically, by law, at the end of 2/3 of your sentence, you are eligible to come up for parole. Okay, and so, and you know, people get shipped in from different prisons. They come to this parole board. They're wearing orange, you know, just like you've seen in the movies. They're held in like basically a holding pen. They come in one by one and they see the judge. Some of them have legal representation. Often they don't have legal representation. The judge is there, and the judge is advised by a social worker and a criminologist when the judge wants.
So the default behavior here, the judge, if I'm a judge,
Yeah.
I have to be risk averse, right? Because I don't want to
Look, if you're a judge, you have to follow the law.
You have to follow the law. Got
Okay,
it.
that's the idea. You have to follow the law. And so, suppose Baba Shiv, you're up for parole because you stole a sack of potatoes.
You already have me as a...
Because why not? And so Baba, you're up for parole, and I have to evaluate your case. Now, I know everything about you. I know where you're from. I know whether or not you've been in prison in the past. I know what you're in prison for. And then I have to decide, do I give you parole? Do I release you early? Or do I say, you know what? Let's keep this guy in prison. And so what we found, and so we knew everything about these prisoners, and the other thing we knew is the order in which they presented to the judge.
Yeah.
So we knew, let's say Ryan, let's throw Ryan under the bus for a second. Our moderator today, Ryan came first, you came second, somebody else came third, the cameraman came fourth, and so on. And so we could simply track people's likelihood of being released at each position. So Ryan came first. I know his probability, basically, like I have a big sample. I know the probability of getting released if Ryan is first. I know your probability of being released if you're second. Third, let's say it's me. I was third, cameraman was fourth, and so on. And if you just graph this, what you find is a decreasing sequence.
Wait.
What does that mean?
Okay.
It means that as you go further down the sequence, you're less likely to be released. Our interpretation was that as the judge is basically getting tired because they have to evaluate information, the judge tends to simplify the decision. The simplification in this case, the default in this case, is stay in prison.
Stay in prison.
But here's the crazy thing. So these judges take 2 meal breaks a day. They take a mid-morning snack break and they take a lunch break, and they decide when they want to take the break. Now, it's very important to understand that the order in which prisoners come in is essentially random. In other words, it's not like the worst prisoners come in the beginning or the best in the beginning. It's all a mix. Okay, it's all a mix. And the judge basically decides when to take a break when he or she is hungry. There's no you're the judge, that's your prerogative. So there isn't a set break time. There's a bracket of time in which people typically get hungry, and that's when you observe the breaks. And what you see after the break is that the first person after the break is more likely to be released than the second person after the break, than the third, and the fourth, and so on. And then they take another break, and the pattern repeats. So imagine an EKG pattern that sort of goes like this.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we don't know what's really happening. I wish we could have these people on a functional magnetic resonance imager like you had with your wine study and put them in there. We don't know what's happening. Our interpretation of what's happening is that people are getting tired. These experts are getting tired. They're not immune to the effects of cognitive fatigue. And as they're getting tired, they simplify their decision. And then they take a break and they replenish. Right? And then they get tired again and they take a break and then they replenish. And so that's what that paper you're referring to is about, and we've seen that kind of pattern, with judges. We've seen it with car buyers, real car buyers, or people who are configuring custom-made suits. So in lots of different arenas, you see this. And if those of us who are in the audience, you've for sure experienced this kind of sense of like decision burnout. We've all had it. If you haven't had it, it means you're not making a lot of decisions.
No, I mean, just to build on that point, Jonathan, I use this in my teaching all the time because we're talking about innovation out here, right? If you think about it, organizations in general, the default behaviors are risk-averse kind of decisions,
Often.
right? I mean, very often. And everyone has faced these kind of stakeholders getting a pushback because they're very kind of risk-averse and so on. And one of the things I always tell people, based on the science, based on your research and other research out there that came after yours, is to say that if you are scheduling a meeting to influence a stakeholder, when should you actually schedule that meeting?
It depends what the default is.
It depends on the default is. And the default in
yeah.
many organizations that I've seen, working with organizations, the default in organizations
Is not to do.
risk-averse, the
Yeah.
status quo bias, right?
Yeah.
I stick to the status quo.
Yes.
Why should I stick my neck out? Because it
Yes.
is risky and so on.
Yes.
So if that is the default behavior,
Yes.
the kind of message out there would be that basically schedule that pitch meeting in the mornings.
That's right.
Or after a meal that
Yeah.
the stakeholder has had. Right?
Yeah, or I mean, after basically some kind of mental break. We don't know if the reason that we see the effect that we see is because people were hungry or it's because they're tired. We don't know, is the effect the meal or the effect is taking a break. But it's certainly the case that, or it's certainly our belief based on the research that that people are more likely to engage in whatever status quo or default behavior, the more cognitively depleted they are. And so, yeah, in the context of a meeting, if you want something that's the opposite of the status quo, don't be at the end of the meeting agenda, because then you're going to be in trouble.
I'll get the questions, but you know what, Jonathan, I really want to give you some time to talk about your I think it's just fascinating stuff that you're doing. And just, you want to share with the audience in terms of technology interfaces, etc.,
Sure.
that can actually change people's decisions and behaviors.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things, so I actually moved here like Baba, but I moved from New York City to Palo Alto 7 years ago. And you get to this place where you move from a world of banking to this world of technology. I don't know if you experienced this, but
I came from Iowa. We only talked about cornfields.
Cornfields, yeah. So for you, for sure. But I sort of got here, and all of a sudden, everybody's talking technology, and I sort of said, well, I'm not going to be able to beat them, so I might as well join them. But joining for me means doing research about it, and so I started becoming interested in how the physical interaction with technology, so the physical interaction with this iPad, for example, how that affects how I weight information, how I think about things, and sort of consumer behavior. And so let me tell you about something that we've recently discovered that I think is particularly cool. So one of the sort of seen as sort of the incontrovertible facts in Silicon Valley is that if you want to develop a product, engineers have to be sitting together. Right? You got it doesn't help that, you got half the team here, half the team in Bangalore, and you can't have another half. A third of the team here, a third of the team in Bangalore, and a third of a team in Berlin, because that doesn't work. People have to be sitting together. And I sort of, I got it, I like to think about myths and why they're wrong, and kind of you're the same way. That's kind of a little bit what our business is to take people's belief and really test them. And so we ran a series of experiments, and the experiment basically goes like this. You and I come into lab together, and we are given a task to come up with as many alternative uses for a Frisbee. So that can be, people use Frisbees. It turns out you can use it as a plate, obviously. You can use it as a whiteboard. Yeah. You can use it as an umbrella. You can use it as lots of things. And we pay for every idea that the group comes up with.
So it is incentive compatible. You are paying money.
I pay you every idea you come up with, I pay you money for.
Got it.
So I do that, and so all you got to do as a group is sit there and just come up with ideas, as many creative ideas as you can. Yeah. And we actually give you the standard. We say, look, we want an idea that's creative. We want it to be original and useful. Okay?
That's how I'm evaluated on.
That's how you're going to be evaluated. So now you generate all these ideas, and the next step, I tell you, okay, now spend a minute figuring out which you think is your best idea. Submit that idea. I have external judges who are going to rate these ideas. If you submitted your best rated idea, I'm going to pay you 5 times as much. And people, in fact, have a chance to win $200, which is quite a lot for these participants. So there's 2 phases: generating ideas, evaluating ideas. There's 2 ways we do it. The first way is face-to-face. We're sitting in a room just like this, and we're talking. The second way is mediated by technology. I look at you, we open up a Skype portal, and I'm looking at you through the screen. So I'm seeing the same information.
You're still seeing me.
It's Baba Shiv, but I'm looking at you through this, okay? So in theory, the information is the same. We've never met before. Like, there's nothing, it's like, it's either you're sitting with a perfect stranger in a room or you're sitting with a stranger through a screen. And what we find is that people who are in the same room generate more ideas. So Silicon Valley's right.
Interesting.
Now, we don't know why, but here's where it gets crazy. But the people in the same room decide worse. In other words...
Wait. They generate more ideas, but when they have to finally pick the best idea?
They pick an idea that's not as good compared to the group that was looking at each other.
No way. Why is that?
Way. So that's and so we've now, we're working with a company now with their engineers and actually running studies with actual engineers, and we're seeing this a kind of similar related pattern. And basically what we think is happening, and we don't know this yet, this is part of, as you know, part of the fun thing about research is there's something evolving, and so I tell the audience this now, but in 6 months we'll have a kind of a more developed story. So this is really hot off the presses stuff. What we think is happening is there's a focusing mechanism with the screen. So, you see people like looking at their iPad or like looking on their phone, and it's like the rest of the world just kind of comes out of focus and peels away. That focus is bad when you're trying to generate ideas that are creative. Why? Because to generate creative ideas, you have to be unleashed. right? I have to sit there and I sit there in the room and I see a light and I see Baba. I'm like, oh, Baba light. I can do a Baba light. But if I'm looking at you through a screen, it's like I'm kind of locked and loaded. Now, that focus is bad for generating ideas, but when it comes time to making decisions, as you know, we have to sit there, we have to weigh the pros and cons.
And you don't want to be distracted by everything else.
I don't want to be distracted. The focus helps. And so that's what we believe, that's what we believe is going on. So we think that'll be a cool piece of news once we're finished with it. But actually, speaking of news, you had something that was in the news a few years ago, which was super cool.
No.
Yes, I'm going to put you on the spot. 100% I'm going to put you on the spot.
Only claim to fame.
So Baba, Baba is a great guy and he's a great colleague.
But
he's famous / infamous for having had his research be one of the few pieces of research in our field that got mentioned, not just mentioned, but like a whole bit on Jay Leno. And so can you embarrass yourself in front of an audience of who knows how many people by talking about that?
Thank you. Just because I embarrassed you with pulling up the judge in parole.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
No. So this, I'll just give you a background behind that research, right? So basically what we did was set up a task where, so this was getting into the notion where people, so there is this prior research that suggests that if I'm going to tell you, Jonathan, that you're going to play this game. Mm-hmm. It's a large number of rounds. I'm not going to tell you the number of rounds. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you $20. Okay? I'm endowing you with $20 in $1 bills.
Oh, okay.
Now, on each round, you can decide not to invest $1.
Okay.
If you don't invest $1, I'll move on.
Okay.
If you decide to invest $1,
yeah,
I'm going to toss a fair coin.
Okay.
If it is heads, you lose the money. If it is tails, I'm going to give $1.50, add $1.50 back to your investment. In other words, you're going to get $2.50.
So every time I gamble, I have a 50% chance?
Correct. If you decide to gamble.
If I decide to gamble?
Correct.
Okay.
So there's been this prior work in behavioral economics, and you know about this. Yuri Ginizzi has done this work where even he'll take people in economics in Chicago, finance in Chicago, and what you'll find typically is that people know what the expected value is. So it is always behooves people to gamble here, because the expected value of gambling is $1.25 compared to not investing, in which case it's $1.
Okay.
But what people will do is they'll start off very close to what is normative. They'll keep gambling.
Okay.
But when they start getting into about the 10th round, they start putting on the brakes.
Okay, so if I'm a regular person, I'm going to give you're going to ask me, do I want to gamble? Yeah, here's a buck.
Here's a buck.
Do I want to gamble? Here's a buck. No. About 10 times.
No, but keep in mind, you're giving the buck, and then you know what the outcome of the gamble is. Because I'm tossing the coin.
Okay.
You know if you're won or if you're lost.
Okay, so I just gave you $1, coin toss, tails, I get $1.50. Thank you very much, Baba Shiv, I appreciate it. Okay.
If it's heads, you're going to lose the money.
I don't want to talk about that.
Anyway.
Okay.
So what we find is that people start becoming conservative as they go along, and that's where behavioral economics will end, and some people are very curious about what is neuroeconomics, and neuroeconomics will say, let's start with that finding, but let's find out what's going on. So let us come up with a hypothesis.
Going on where? Going on here?
Going on the head.
Great.
So the hypothesis were very simple, saying that it is emotion that is hijacking the rational side, because the rational side knows what to do, but the emotional side, with each of the outcomes, it is learning that I gamble, I have won, I have lost, and in general, the brain tends to be loss averse. We know the loss aversion, that we tend to be more risk averse than risk prone, right, in general.
Yeah.
So as the wins and losses happen, all this is getting registered in the brain in the form of emotions. If there's a win happened in the previous round, you go, yay.
Yeah.
If there's a loss, you go,
Yeah.
And so when you're getting into the, let's say, 10th, 11th round, your rational brain is saying, gamble.
Yeah.
But the emotional brain, especially the negative emotions, come in and say, no, don't. And so the hypothesis...
I could have used this in Las Vegas this weekend.
So the hypothesis here is that it is emotion that is screwing us up, which means that if we take patients who have suffered damage to their emotional circuitry, they have suffered a stroke, it took away areas of the emotional circuitry.
So what does that mean? They don't feel? They don't have emotions?
They don't experience emotion like you and I do. Because it has just taken away that emotional area.
Oh.
And we compare them with patients who suffered a stroke, but that stroke didn't damage the emotional circuitry, which means the circuitry was intact.
Okay, so now what's going to happen?
Now we'll play the game.
So you have these two kinds of people, regular people like you and me, and then...
Then you have stroke patients, but some of them have damage to the emotional circuitry, some of them have damage to the brain, but not the emotional circuitry.
Got it.
And what we find here is that the people who have had suffered damage to the emotional circuitry perform normative. In other words, even as the rounds go on to 20 rounds, they're constantly gambling. and they end up
So wait a
earning more
second. So
money.
the people who've had a stroke and as a result can't feel,
Can feel.
make more correct decisions, make more money.
Correct. Than the normal people or the patients who had damage but didn't take away the emotional circuitry.
Oh, wow.
So it's not about the stroke that has caused it, it's about the emotions. So there are no, so think about it. These patients who are doing it are coming in and say the rational thing to do is to gamble. But there's no emotional signal that is coming in to say, don't do that, put on the brakes.
Oh, wow.
So that was here that, I mean, long story short, Jay Leno comes in with this, and you can check it out on the web, it's out there. Jay Leno comes in and says, here's this crazy study from the Stanford Business School. And I'm going, and I'm watching the show because I used to be a big fan of Jay Leno. I thought, what is this he's talking about?
What colleague of mine got it?
Yeah, what colleague of mine and said from the Stanford Business School. It showed that patients who have actually damage to their brain outperform normal individuals in an investing task. Therefore, if you're trying to invest in the stock market and you're banging your head against the wall, keep banging your head against the wall. It only gets better.
You gotta be kidding.
Anyway, that's the small story.
So have you changed how you invest?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I asked someone else to do it.
I see. With somebody with no emotions.
So no emotions. That's why you have an agent, right? Otherwise, me, and it's weird, like, because very often, like advisor Jim Bettman used to say, we generally study topics where we're not good at something, or we're too good at something. Like for me, I'm a very emotional kind of a person, and so it's weird that I do research on. Most of my career, I spend my time
doing research on emotions.
emotion.
So Jay Leno picked this up. That's pretty nice. We have some questions from our audience. Let's see if we can answer a couple.
So how would you reduce the power of defaults? How to fight the status quo bias?
Oh, okay. All right. So the question that's being asked by Ali is, just to repeat it for everybody to hear, is how would you reduce the power of defaults? How do you fight off the status quo bias? That's a tough one. Here's why it's tough in part, is we don't know, at least in the context of our research, where is the mistake?
Yeah.
Is the mistake at the beginning? Are judges too lenient? Is it the judges are too lenient in the beginning, or are they too tough towards the end of the sequence? And so until you know that, or if you think in the context of your example, you were talking about a meeting. Is the right thing to admit this student or to give this grant or to make this investment, or is the right decision not to, right? So until you know that, it's hard to know what the right policy is, actually. But in general, I don't know that I would want to reduce the power of defaults. I would want to harness the power of defaults.
Correct.
What I want to do is I want to make the good decision, the right decision, the better decision, the decision I want, make that, set that as a default. So instead of fighting this bias that people have, actually try to take advantage of the bias that people have to get them to make better decisions.
And to build on that point, Jonathan, I know we're kind of coming close to the end of this, but the thing about it, you do a lot of work on new products, right? I mean, your research as well as your teaching, you talk about new products. And one of the things that you learn from that research is that, from what you just said right now, is that when you're bringing in a new product, a new design into the market, try to have some element out there that is part of the status quo.
Yes.
Right? Think about when Microsoft came out with their Windows, I forget which version was that, they removed the start button.
Yeah.
And people were just...
They go bananas.
They go bananas. I mean, it's just, I mean, so from a design perspective, what you do to leverage the status quo bias is pick up some elements from the original design.
Yes.
And bring it out here so that at least the status quo part of it will say, this is kind of familiar.
But the other thing, yeah, that's right. But there's another layer there, which is how familiarity is something that's good.
Correct.
People are attracted to familiarity. That's a whole other discussion.
Now, I have the pleasure of being able to ask Jonathan and Baba a question before I go back.
Whoa, wait a second.
Yeah.
That wasn't part of the deal.
And my question to you is, as you were building the innovative marketing program, what did you want to achieve?
Ooh, a lot.
Well, you want me to start? Or
Yeah, why don't you go first? Yeah.
So my thing was, if you kind of look at innovation in organizations and businesses out there, one thing that was very common that I was beginning to notice is that marketing was not at the table at all. when people are formulating their strategy about innovation, marketing seemed to be getting irrelevant, even though, if you think about it, at the end of the day, it is a customer who has to be buying the product. I mean, the validation of the innovation is going to come from the customer ponying up on some money. So we got to understand customer behavior and so on, right?
Sure.
And that's where marketing comes in. And for me, the whole thrust is, how do we make marketers relevant again in the future? And that is the basic thrust of this program, is to provide mentally provision the folks in marketing to, or even otherwise, to kind of understand the importance of marketing, the importance of the customer behavior, etc., in kind of innovation efforts going forward for the organization. So that's where I come from. One of the reasons why I'm so kind of looking forward to this program.
And it makes sense given that you had a career before this in marketing, and so this is kind of like, yeah, you know, like, wait a second, I gotta recapture my place around the table. The reason I kind of what I want people to get out of this program is a real deep understanding of consumer behavior, because you know if you look at the marketplace today and the pace at which technology is changing consumer behavior, it's so fast. I mean, it took us, I don't know, 1,000 years to get to the internet, and then between internet and mobile, it took 4 years, 5 years, right? And then, I mean, I guess the iPhone came out in 2007. You know, it was, and then, so the iPhone comes out in 2007, and then all of a sudden we have cloud. And then cloud's gone, and now we're talking about artificial intelligence, and the time between each one of those revolutions is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
In B2B as well, by the way.
In
right?
B2B, 100% for sure. Yeah. And so, in business models are changing, and so I think that what we knew 15 or 20 years ago is important. It's still the basis of what we need to know now, but there's a whole other layer of consumer behaviors that we need to understand, and understanding those behaviors comes from studying how markets work, studying how companies work, and studying consumer behavior. And so for me, I see this as a chance for two guys like us to sort of take what we learn in the laboratory and show how important it is for understanding the sort of modern consumer problem. And in being able to do that, mentally provisioning people to take them from here to here, to being kind of that much more ready for the next disruption, to lead the disruption themselves. And for me, it's not even about bringing marketing back to the table, but I think any organization, any leader should be a marketing leader, because like you point out, and I tell this to my students all the time, cash flows come from customers. Like that's at the core, and that's sort of
wasn't it Peter Drucker who said that all that matters for organizations is innovation and marketing. All the rest is just cost.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
I like that because I'm in marketing.
Yeah, and of course. And okay, so that's sort of how I see the program. That's sort of what makes me excited about it. And the other aspect, both of us, of course, not having been in Stanford our whole careers and now having been for many years now at Stanford, there's some magic in this institution. And I can't believe I'm admitting this in front of a bunch of people I don't know, but there's something in the water that sort of carries some kind of genetic material, and that genetic material is one that turns regular people into innovative people. I don't know exactly how it happens.
And that way it has happened. I mean, I've been running this program, the similar kind of programs, over the years. And in just 1 week and a half or 2 weeks, and we have completely transformed people, right? It's incredible what Stanford does to people.
So that, yeah, I mean that sort of, to me is part of what I know you like to do in this program. What I like to do in this program is to take that gene, take a little bit of whatever's in that water, distill those molecules down, and hand it over to people. But I don't want us to wrap up before answering, one or two questions. Let's see that the audience members have sent us, because there's so many good ones here, and we're just going to sort of have to pick at random. There's one that I liked about, here, Baba, this one is about, wait a second, oh yeah. How do decisions based on perceptions impact subscriptions or renewals, especially when there is apparent discount / try and buy? I think that's especially important now because there's such a premium placed on recurring revenue. Maybe that's a tech company bias, but how do perceptions kind of play into it? How does freemium fit with this idea of yours with wanting and liking?
So one of the one of the things, and that's what we're seeing, when we talk about new business models out there, it's incredible when you talk about subscription models, how that is penetrated into not only B2C, but then B2B as well, right?
Of course.
We first saw subscriptions like Netflix and so on. And then we began to see this coming into movies now. You can actually buy a subscription for a month, unlimited number of movies. You're seeing this in automobiles right now, right? Where it's not. So, for example, drivecanvas.com, if you go to its Ford Motor Company that is beta testing out here, where you pay $500 and a car is delivered, you don't own the car, it is bumper to bumper, everything is covered.
Yeah.
You look at airlines now getting into subscription models out here. I think what subscription models, I don't know, I haven't done research on that, but
What do you speculate?
My speculation is that subscription models remove price from the equation. Because the money is being taken away from the account. I don't realize that it's not a physical kind of thing, money going out. It just gets, the only time where people pause and think about is it worth is when they increase the price of the subscription.
Okay.
Remember Netflix came in and initially it used to be $7.99 and so
Yeah,
on, and then
they
they increased the price. And then people are saying, wait a second, is
Yeah.
it
Am I willing to pay
worth-
another
am I willing
dollar?
to pay another dollar for
Yeah.
that? But otherwise, I think it just removes price from the equation, which means people can start focusing more on the benefit side of the equation, tangible as well as intangible side of the equation.
Okay, but so how does freemium, let's think about the price placebo stuff from earlier. How does freemium affect then expectations of how, of the perceptions of the product? Because freemium basically says, hey, I'm giving you away this product for free, not all of it, at least some of it. And so, you know, the initial research you talked about would suggest that, okay, then people are going to think it's not as good. They're not going to perform as much well with it. They're not going to value it as much. How does that new business model fit with what we know about customer psychology and placebo effects?
Great question. So you see this in the gaming business, right? And this is going to become huge, especially with the Supreme Court decision that was made yesterday where, you know, online gambling is okay and stuff,
Yeah.
right? So freemium, and I advise several companies out here in Silicon Valley, and one of the things I don't like is freemium models.
Oh,
And I don't like freemium models because why are you doing a freemium? Your freemium is you're reducing the risk to zero in terms of the price side. Come and try out the product.
Yeah.
And then you can make a decision whether you're going to pay for it going forward.
pay for an enhanced
For
version.
an enhanced version of that. And you'll see switching behaviors are very high
Yeah.
when people are free. But when they start paying for it is when they will you'll see the stickiness.
Okay.
Right? So a good parallel out there, it's not truly a subscription model, but these are membership models. Think about what Amazon has been doing. I think one of the most successful things that Amazon did, this was 2005, it's part of the business model was to come into Amazon Prime.
Okay.
By that time, you pay, remember, $79 and
Yeah.
you get 2-day free shipping and handling.
Yeah.
And you and I know about this. Every time an individual makes an investment, it could be monetary, it could be physical,
Yeah.
it could be mental.
They want to amortize it.
It gives rise to what is called the IKEA effect or the IKEA effect, right? And the IKEA effect is that you made the investment, now you feel as though it is your own baby.
Yeah.
And you'll see a lot more stickiness. So when if you look at leakage in the system, leakage means that from time to time people are moving to the competition and coming back and sometimes never coming back. You'll see that if you go in for subscription models, which takes price out of the equation, or you go in for a membership model where there's an investment, leakage rates will actually drop from like 80%, 60 to 80% to even 20%.
Okay.
Because if I'm in Amazon and I put in $79 membership fee, now going to Walmart.com feels as though I'm losing something.
Yeah.
It's the sunk cost fallacy and
Sure.
the IKEA effect and so on, right? So I always tell my advisees when I'm advising companies is that get people to pay upfront. If people are not willing to pay upfront,
Yeah.
maybe you have a trial period, 15 days, 30 days. If they're not paying for it, if they're not paying pilots, if they're not paying customers out there, which means that you're not provided the right kind of value. If you have the right kind of value that is being provided to the customer should be willing to pay. For me, the true test of an innovation that is coming into the marketplace is the customer willing to pony up the money.
Yeah, and there's like a version that I remember a real player in the first .com bubble would say, we'll give you 2 weeks for free, but give us your credit card number now.
Correct.
Right? So they're essentially preparing to charge you. They're imposing some kind of cost,
Precisely.
but they're giving you some kind of carrot
Precisely.
to
So
join.
they're removing the risk involved in trying it out, but they also have the credit card. It gets charged. Then if it is subscription, it keeps getting charged, but price is not part of the equation anymore.
Yeah.
Right, and then that's the way to think about it.
Baba, this was fun. I think we're out of time. There's more of this for us to do. We'll be doing it all summer.
Yep.
And as long as we're at Stanford, so we're excited. Ryan, over to you. Thank you very much.
Bob, Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for everybody for attending.